Hey everyone, Anne O'Connell with OC Publishing here, and welcome to the author journey. Today we are celebrating a recent launch of a new memoir by one of our dear friends who has been on before, and her name is Marjorie Simmons. There she is, and she's waiting backstage to join me in just a short time. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about her, and she can tell you more when she joins us. Marjorie Simmons is an award-winning journalist and author and teacher. Her lifelong practice of creative nonfiction adds depth and energy to her memoirs, biographies, and narrative journalism. The author of 5 books, Simmons' latest title, In Search of Puffins, Stories of Loss, Light, and Flight, is the third in a trio of memoirs preceded by Coastal Lives and The Year of the Horse. Puffins honors her late husband, writer and filmmaker Silver Donald Cameron, and all who recreate themselves after loss. An unflinching look at the demands of grief, Puffins also celebrates friendship, laughter, and creativity, and how all of these things help to heal tender hearts. Simmons lives in a good luck house in Truro, Nova Scotia. We'll have to ask her what makes it good luck. She's proud to say she not only knows what a tidal bore is, she has seen them barreling along in the Bay of Fundy. So let's bring Marjorie up to join me and hear all about her beautiful book.
Hello, hello.
Puffins. Hi, Marjorie.
There it is.
Who doesn't love a puffin? I mean, who's going to have this book? And I always like to say it, Pottersfield Press is your publisher, and they've produced an absolutely gorgeous piece of work here. And of course, the content is extreme, very moving, and it's a lovely book. And I would say nationally and maybe even internationally, but certainly in Atlantic Canada, Silver Donald Cameron was and is still a treasure, right? I mean, everybody loves.
I love that word, treasure. Yeah, I would have to agree with you. He is gone, but he is not forgotten.
Oh my goodness, that is so true. And with your new book, that just reinforces that his legacy just kind of lives on, and it builds yours as well. So, I mean, talk a little bit about why this book. So this is a third in a series of memoirs. You have a book about how to write memoirs, which
Yeah.
I keep on my shelf very close to me. So what triggered the writing of the third of these memoirs?
Thank you for the question. I didn't know there was going to be a first memoir, let alone a second and a third, if you know what I mean. I mean, the writing process is always a mysterious, magical sort of affair. And I was very pleased when that first one came out, which was basically how I ended up. Well, ended up sounds terrible. How I was transported from BC to Cape Breton to live my life there with Don in our first years together. And then, Year of the Horse was just a natural sort of second book because it had drama, it had, pathos, it had all sorts of again, continuing on with the story of Don and I together here in Nova Scotia. And, when I lost Don, it sort of flitted across my mind. I thought, oh, well, yes, I suppose, it would be an interesting experience to write about now. But I flinched away from it. I thought, oh, yes, yeah, just too much.
Fresh.
Too much.
Yeah.
And I also had people around me saying, well, surely you're going to write, something about this, how your life has changed. And I thought, maybe. And it actually, the book started with 2 standalone pieces, which I had been working on. And those became chapter 1 and chapter 2. And when I had written them and polished them and just fussed with them for countless months, I looked at them and went, oh, that's chapter 1 and chapter 2. It was like a gift, right? It was like someone said, well, you've already started the book. And I said, well, I guess I have, so on I went. And of course, this is some years. I mean, I'm coming up to what left us 5 years ago in June. So I would have been doing this writing in year 4. And everyone's different, but I found that I didn't have much of a creative spirit for at least 2.5 years.
Oh, sure. And I remember at your writing retreat at the Thinkers Lodge last year, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Where you talked a lot about writing memoir, and talked about those first two chapters. So, what was it after you said that, aha, I have chapters? Did you immediately jump into it? Like, what was the process after that?
Yeah, it's funny because it was kind of the opposite of what the first two chapters had been, which was this sort of, loving, polishing, living with them for a long time. They're
Yeah.
almost like performance pieces. They're pretty, I don't know, whatever they are, but
Mhm.
they're certainly well loved.
Mhm.
And then it was Charge of the Light Brigade, which is the way I usually write books.
Mhm.
I'm not like that as a journalist. I'm painfully slow journalist because I really, I live in mortal terror of making mistakes and all that sort of thing. Um, but when you're writing
I
your own
love
story,
that.
it's true, right? It's true. When you're writing your own story, you're pretty darn sure what happened,
Mhm.
although, writing a memoir is always, part fiction and part memory and all that good stuff. It really is.
Mhm.
Nonetheless, I knew the plot, and on I went. But another wonderful thing that happened that really made me realize that I was onto something, that this book had to be finished and all the rest of it, is I dreamt the title. And that was pretty amazing. I woke up one
Yep.
morning and went, "Oh, well, there's my title," and ran for my journal, and
Yes.
there we went. And that was crucial because,
Yep.
as having read the book, Puffins is a big part of it. And of course, I had to have a subtitle because I didn't want every ornithologist in the world saying, "Oh my gosh, she's written a book on puffins." Like, no, she hasn't. Puffins are in there. They are a character, but they are not the main meal. And
Oh.
yeah,
And
so
it's really it's one of those, also, because who doesn't love puffins, as I said before? So it's an eye-catching title and cover. So, people walking by are liable to do a double take and it's gonna draw them in, which is awesome. And I
it
was
is
saying when you
awesome.
were talking about, your because you wear, at least two hats, if not more. So the author and the journalist. And do you find where do you find the most joy? So I would think, and I've done some travel writing and feature writing, so I have a bit of a feel sense for this, but wanted to know from someone who has had a lifetime. Do you get more satisfaction when a shorter piece is finished, or when you finally reach the last page of the first shitty draft of a book?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think the joys kind of come and go as you're writing. I have a tendency. Someone said to me the other day, and I was actually kind of pleased about this. They said, it's almost as though those chapters of yours are little stories that
Vignettes.
do flow one to
Mhm.
the other, but they're almost complete in themselves. And I think that's the way my brain works a little bit. I do like
Mhm.
beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
And I do like resonance, and I do like sort of elliptical sort of shapes that bring you back to where you started, and so on. It's
Mhm,
not it's
mhm,
not religiously like that. It's not
mhm.
painfully like that. But I was just sort of interested that was their impression. But yeah, no, there's the good times and the bad times, and you just I mean, I can take as much pleasure in a sentence as I can in a decent chapter. And honestly, I was cartwheeling when I found that puffins were going to be a part of the story.
Oh, I love that. Cartwheeling and pogoing. You tend to, like, your enthusiasm kind of spills out, like, in your physicality too. I love that. So there were a couple of places in the book where, you know, a visitor was coming, that when Muriel first came to see the house in Truro, and you were pogoing on and I just could, I had this vision of you
I
bouncing up and
did.
down.
I
It
truly
was,
did.
yeah, it was really, really cute. So this journey, this book is sort of 5-year journey about sort of reinventing and overcoming such a huge loss. It made me think about, and when you met Dawn, you were a little older than, you weren't like a 19-year-old bride or whatever. Who was Marjorie before dawn, this is a big question, but see if you can, before dawn, during dawn, and now, like, what were the biggest sort of shifts in your personality or how you
Well, it's kind of a
operate?
huge question.
It is.
I'll try. I think I was in my 30s when
Mhm,
I met Don and married where I was 39, I guess. And, you're a fully formed human being. You simply are. And
mhm,
also, when you have an important relationship like that, there are things about you that the other person enjoys.
mhm.
So Don enjoyed the fact that I was dotty about dogs and I was, devoted to horses and all those sorts of things. So again, a fully formed human being with whom he fell in love, and those parts of me were things he enjoyed almost as much as I enjoyed.
Mhm,
And I kept all those things that made me me all the way along. And I was incredibly grateful when I lost Dawn that again
mhm,
I had those things I could lean into.
mhm,
I could go to a barn and shovel a stall and feel, immense satisfaction that I had done that, or groom a horse or whatever it is, long
mhm,
dog walk and so on. And those started to bring the light back,
mm.
things that had always, to the point where I thought, I don't know how other people manage if they don't have passions in their
Yes.
life,
I have to say it's funny that you I actually wrote down "horse sweat and hay, my type of cologne." I mean, there was more elements to that sort of, odorific essence that comes of, after you've ridden a horse and mucked out a stall.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Well, I
love
mean,
that.
that's just to show you how much, I love the whole circle of barn
Mhm,
life, the way it
mhm,
smells, the way it feels, the way, it gets you tired. My mother used to call a virtuous fatigue.
mhm.
Your
Oh, I love
arms.
that.
Yeah,
I
you
love
know,
that. So
and
the essence of Marjorie has always been like you just exude this sort of joyful
aw,
passion, but reading this book, you look at the other end of the spectrum, and so the devastation is palpable here. Um, so 5 years down, like in hindsight, what can you offer to somebody who has like a fresh loss? Like, what is the biggest piece of advice?
well, number one, I wouldn't offer anybody advice. I learned that the best that
Smart.
you can say when somebody has a loss of any sort is just simply stick with, I'm sorry for your loss.
Hmm.
And if you're up in Cape Breton, I'm sorry for your troubles.
Yeah.
And that'll about cover it, because I guess this is what our lives are all about, is until we have actually walked a certain mile of an
Hmm.
experience, we really don't know. So when I think back of the things I said to people who had losses, I cringe. I
Mm.
just you
I
think
know.
it's
I
just,
know.
oh, couldn't I have just kept it zippered?
Yeah.
Just, I'm sorry for your loss. So, in the same way that In Search of Puffins is not a how-to, uh,
No.
by any means. I wouldn't
Mhm.
really advise anybody about anything. I would say just, take your time, maybe just
Mm.
take your time. But, when I explore the issue of loss, I'm also kind of exploring the idea of change. And that was what fascinated me. So when I say, this is dedicated to Dawn, it's dedicated to people who have experienced loss. And loss can be a lot of different things. It can be an
Yeah.
actual death, it can be a divorce, it can be a loss of a very important job that you weren't seeing, you didn't see it coming,
Hmm.
et cetera, et cetera. And I find that we do these recreations throughout our lives, and
Hmm.
that's what really fascinated me here, was the whole recreation. And sometimes I still can't believe that Dawn hasn't been in this house, this lovely little good luck.
The good luck.
You know,
Okay, so I want to give a shout out to those who are watching. If you're watching live today, and if you have any questions for Marjorie or comments, please feel free to pop them in there. We are talking about Marjorie's most recent book, In Search of Puffins, um, stories of Loss, Light, and Flight. I was going to say love, and I want to shout out to Sue Slade, who's just popped on. Hey, Sue.
Hi,
So,
Sue.
do you have an excerpt that you would like to read for us today?
Right. And of course, I cannot believe this. Where is a book? I didn't put it right beside my desk. Can you give me 1 second?
Yes,
Oh my
yes.
God, I can't believe I was so prepared, but no.
Oh, that's all right.
Okay.
I love some of these. Oh, there's Frankie.
There's Frankie, and
So if
here's the book.
anybody reads this, Frankie features prominently, and
Oh,
Frankie also, if you do go to one of Marjorie's workshops, chances are you'll meet Miss Frankie in person. I had the pleasure of doing.
Okay, so we want about 5 minutes, do we?
Yeah. And
Okay.
shout out to Christine Fowler, just joined us. Hi, Christine. Nice to see you.
Okay. All right. Well, I haven't timed this, so we will go for a little bit and see how that goes. Oh, very exciting. So this is chapter 2, and it's titled Denial. And I'm just going to jump right in. When you come home, you will see the candles set on the window ledges in the front porch, pinpoints of light to guide your steps to the door. An eddy of dogs will churn around your knees, and 2 arms will reach out for your travel-weary frame. The kitchen behind us will be fragrant with the onion and meat-rich smells of a simmering supper. We will eat, but not right away. Space the pleasures, my father would always say, a wisdom I have always tried to live by. You will shed your coat, find your slippers. We will sit by the orange and gold fire in the living room, also filled with candles. The dogs will settle in their beds, eyes flickering to follow who is speaking. The room will be warm, the laughter frequent, as the sharp bits of missing you begin to smooth over. The first home we lived in was surrounded by Douglas firs that swayed low when the northwesterlies of the West Coast settled in. No matter how much time went by, I could never viscerally understand the predominant winds of the East Coast, the soft southwesterlies, and the damaging northeasters, as well as I did the winds of my younger years in BC. In the west, the nor'westerlies are fresh and punchy, the skies a bedazzled blue with cumulus clouds tipping across them. The southeasterlies are sullen and unrelenting, the skies ashen and the clouds darker yet, sodden with water shooting downward. In that dark log house in Gibsons, BC, lightened by new romantic hope, we wrote for hire and by habit of a lifetime. In the evenings by the wood stove, we shared our personal stories. At some point each day, we walked Leo the Whippet over rocky beaches and hiked deep into the woods. Came at last to the Skookumchuck Narrows. Around us, the scents offered themselves as coastal and complex. Forest, earth, and ocean joined in an ancient union. At home again, we made love as though the front door was ajar, one of us set to leave on the morrow. For you, even more than me then, tomorrows were not to be trusted. Only a scant year prior, you had lost a beloved, someone whose death you wore like an iron weight around your neck. Yet despite gray pallor and shaking hands, you had reached out strongly for me. I, 37, battered, self-destructive, needed more to believe in love, even than to love. That feeling was building in short, hot bursts, as though I turned my face to one of those playful northwesterlies, the sun pulsing in and out behind the clouds. I held out my hand in return, certain I would love you fully, and could, of course, repatriate your love to the West. Why not? Like me, you'd been raised there. The love did indeed come. The permanent move did not. Instead, we compromised and made a life together in different homes. We lived in a sea captain's home on the shores of the Atlantic, and in a townhouse in a fishing village on the banks of the Fraser River. For 3 winters, we lived on American turf, but as always, close to the ocean. Our rental house was a minute's walk from the tidal flats of Boundary Bay, which ebbed and flowed on a grand scale into the Pacific Ocean. In the tidal pools or at the water's edge, great blue herons stood motionless. Then their yellow beaks flashed down, seemingly at their own reflections, only to rise again with a small flounder entrapped. You knew how much I loved herons, seeing them as good luck talismans. You found the area's best kept secret, a huge heronry tucked in the far northwestern corner of Point Roberts. It was spring. A sign at the trailhead said, "No trespassing." We apologized for our entry with silence and soft steps. The ground was slick with last year's leaves and fresh rain, along with thick, vein-like tree roots and sharp rocks, both humping up from the black earth. I watched my feet, not wanting to stumble. "Look up," you said. "This is what we came for." In the clearing, far up in the sky, the peaks of the cottonwoods and alders grew dozens of massive spiky nests made of twigs and moss. In these, young herons raised their thin necks and opened their mouths for food. Adult herons sky glided to the young ones, their immense wingspans contracting as they landed, claws extended. The sounds during flight were primordial and also somehow representative of all that mattered to avian, animal, or human. Home, family, nurture, companionship and growth, survival. We watched the birds come and go from their colony until our hands and feet were nearly numb from the gathering mist and damp cold. "Home now," I whispered. "Yes." We sat as close as we could to the fire in the rock fireplace that evening, knees touching. The dog lay beside us, eyes shut, his tan and white side slowly rising and falling. Unthinking, we matched our breathing to his, or perhaps it was the other way around. I'll stop there.
Oh, I love that. Oh my goodness. It's interesting because one of the questions I jotted down came back to my mind when you were talking about, trying to draw him away from the West Coast. You guys did straddle like heart and home, from Vancouver, Halifax, Discoos, and you mentioned I didn't realize that you'd lived in the US at one point, and now you're in Truro. I mean,
do you know, all I ever wanted was a white picket fence and to not move. I've got a white picket, I got a white porch now, so I think that dream has finally come true. It's been a grand adventure, and one of the things Don used to think was highly amusing, I said, I always knew I would have an adventurous life. I had a very adventurous life before I met you. I was flying to the Aleutian Islands, and I was going to the North Pole, and I was doing fisheries stories all over the province, and just great life. I said, but I never thought that you would raise the ante so high. Right? Because it was just like, okay, you thought that was adventurous, baby. Yeah. I'm going to show you adventure. So I guess that trend hasn't really quit.
Oh, that's good. I love the champagne sailing. I'm a fair weather sailor, but you had all ends of the spectrum.
Oh, my gosh.
Experienced some pretty brutal sailing trips too, right?
We did, and of course I had the commercial fishing background, so the boats were very, very different. And the first time I suggested politely but firmly to Don that he might want to get an engine, he I said, most of the boats I've been in have had 2 engines. Anyway, he said, "Oh, no, dreadful. They stink. And they're terrible."
Sailors call those iron ginnies, right?
Yeah. Oh my
No
goodness.
way.
Well, after a few years, particularly after a storm up in the Bredor Lakes one time where we tacked back and forth this little narrow passageway, for I don't know, about
Oh,
an hour, thunder,
agonizing.
lightning, and the wharf I could have spit to. I could have spit to that wharf. Back and forth we went, back and forth. And we finally got there. And of course I had to make a big ultimatum, and that was, if you want to turn me against sailing for the rest of my life, just keep, don't get that engine.
Do that again, right?
I did.
Oh my goodness.
And you don't
Oh
have to have
Lord.
it on all the time.
Right, right. Just when, in a calm, you don't want to be becalmed. And again, most sailors, that are becalmed, just it's part of the natural experience. But also I want to say, Sue has said you're going to be a guest at the book club at Dartmouth Book Exchange in June. So
I
folks, make sure
am.
you watch for that.
I'm totally looking forward to that because, with book clubs, number one, they're all brainiacs. They just tend to be that way, and they're all heart too, and
Yeah.
they are all different. So you never know what one person will take away and another person will notice.
Hmm.
So it's always good fun.
Oh, I love that. And Christine says, now I have to buy your book. It's like those TBR piles just get taller and taller. And Christine is a memoir writer as well. Her book Behind the Dress, which is a real page turner. So she loved chatting.
Congratulations, Christine. Good for you.
Oh, oh, it's incredible.
Oh, good.
And I mentioned a little bit earlier, your book on memoir writing. And while you were reading, I just grabbed it from my shelf.
Yay.
And we're conversations in craft. So I guess, the last little bit that, I would like you to kind of touch on is, memoir has become quite a popular genre.
Yes.
And we talked a little bit backstage about Memoir Plus, which has all kinds of extra things. So it can be traumatic, but it can be cathartic to write your memoir, of course, depending on your life experience. So in that vein, advising from a writing perspective and someone who has written a book about writing memoirs and does workshops, what approach worked for you and what approach have you seen work for other writers?
For taking on a memoir, or
Yeah.
yeah, I'm always, so I guess I'm getting a little distracted here, but I'm always sort of interested by this idea of cathartic,
Mhm.
and I know I'm in the minority here. I don't find this sort of writing cathartic, but
Mm.
I do find, I mean, there's a sense of pride and accomplishment when
Mhm.
you've done something as best you can. So, whoa, sorry, we're just
That's
gonna,
okay.
I tell you, dogs barking, phones ringing, how much bad, worse
That's
than
what I love about live.
right. Yeah, the people come to memoir for all sorts of different reasons, and I think every single one of them is valid.
Mhm.
If it's catharsis, great. If it's for me, top of the list is, I really want to create something beautiful. That's
Mhm.
really my hope and desire and drive.
Mhm.
And also in this instance, it was the honoring that was so important to me. There couldn't be a beginning, a middle, and no end.
Right.
That's kind of what I found. But any way a person comes to writing and wants to create something that's heartful and beautiful, bravo, brava, do it.
Love it. I love it. And I wanted to bring up before we wrap up your website again. So if anybody wants to learn more about Marjorie, there's her web, marjoriesimmons.ca. Couldn't be easier. And also wanted to share where you can get her books. They're all on, I think you can order them, and actually I did find you can order them through Pottersfield Press,
Wow.
and they are all also on, there they are, what a beautiful
Ooh, look
lineup.
at you.
Look at
Okay.
that. Also all on Amazon as well. So make sure that you pick
And
up a copy. And if you're in Halifax, they're everywhere.
Yay. And
Which is,
support your indie bookstore if
yeah,
you can. You know,
yeah.
Amazon's fine and Chapters is fine, but you know, we do have some absolutely, the Bookmark, I gather,
Mhm.
has copies and so on. So support your local
Yeah.
bookstore. That would be
And
grand.
they'll be at Dartmouth Book Exchange, of course. And you know, I sometimes I'll go to, it's a website, indiebookstores.ca. You
Hmm.
can type in the title of the book that you want and your postal code, and it will come up with a list of stores that either carry it or will order it for you.
Hmm.
So I find that a wonderful
Well,
resource.
that's a
Yeah.
good tip. That's excellent.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can't believe we're already we knew we'd fill this time
Wow.
without even trying.
Yep.
It was so much fun to have you back, Marjorie. And, you know, congratulations on the launch of this gorgeous book, In Search of Puffins.
Thank you
And, you
so
know,
much, Anne Louise. This has been a ball. I mean, you and I, we know how to chat.
we
We
sure
know how to
do.
chat.
Absolutely.
And so
And
thank you kindly, and all the best with everything, your busy
thank
life
you.
and OC Publishing and the podcast and all the rest of it. All of us are in awe of what you do.
Oh, heavens. Well,
So,
do you know
so
what? It's people like you that make me look good.
no,
So,
thanks a million, and I sure hope our paths cross soon.
oh, they will for sure. And Marjorie will be out and about doing book signings. So make sure you follow all the socials and pop by and say hi. So I really appreciate you, Marjorie, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so very much. All the best.
You too. And thank you for joining us today on the author journey. I'm Anne O'Connell with OC Publishing, and I hope you're having lots of fun reading great books and writing even better ones. And we'll see you again next time on the author journey. Bye.